After some violent interactions with the locals within the nest of District 20, Mephistopheles continued on its journey to Wuthering Heights. Dante observed that they emerged from the back streets, or at least a part of the nest bordering on the back streets. The boundaries implied to be not that clear. They emerged into a rather quiet village. The fog was still thick, and everything was still in a faded hue. Even the occasional sighting of pedestrians ceased. Colour variation would appear to be an alien concept there, certainly for those that are locals. All that's seen are orange-hued lights coming through the windows of misty grey buildings, as though everyone decided to stay indoors for the day. They can't even tell where they were, or how close they were to their destination anymore. Much like industrial cities in Britain before the Clean Air Act of 1956, due to the smog and air pollution getting worse before that. Pollution certainly had a part in where they were. Dante then asked Yi Sang, who had lived in District 20 for a time, if he had been there by any chance. Sadly, the scenery was unfamiliar to him. He explained that while he lived in District 20 for a time, most of his hours were spent as an architect and conducting research when he could afford to do so. So he didn't go out on the streets of District 20 unless he needed to. Dante couldn't imagine... Dante couldn't imagine doing research in that place, not thinking that'd be easy. According to Yi Sang, it was quite manageable once he grew accustomed to everything being monochrome, or sepia. Those born there wouldn't know any better, and colour variants would be unfamiliar to them. He also had friends to help him manage this, even for a short while. This helped in a place as different as it can be to District 19, and this was likely reminding him of him fleeing District 19 and his time in District 20, along with the breaking of the League of Nine, the betrayal of Dong Rang, his imprisonment in N-Corps, or at least an N-Corps-affiliated facility, and his recruitment as one of Task Force Damned. Ishmael then asked if he has heard anything about what T-Corp's singularity was. Yi Sang didn't know, as like all singularities, its true nature, its mechanisms and functions elude him. Well, Dante knows quite a bit about the singularity of K-Corp, but they're keeping it to themselves for now. Yi Sang has the idea that it has something to do with time, but was unsure of its use. He saw this as meaningless conjecture. Only Faust must be aware of some answers. Faust mentioned that its singularity is one of the reasons why T-Corp constantly drains colour from its inhabitants and their surroundings. Rodia asked what time has to do with colour. Faust theorizes that if the control of time is imperative to T-Corp's operations, then they must also control the realm of light. And light has to do with the spectrum of colours. Those two subjects eventually overlap. That's as far as she could deduce regarding the concept of time that she was aware of, and it took time for her to reach that knowledge regarding T-Corp's singularity. Dante knew that she rarely gave detailed answers. And just as Dante was about about to ask her something. Yisang spoke of them discussing the subject of time, and Faust decided to move on from the subject of T-Corp at this time. And this disappointed Dante, and it was mildly irritating to Rudyard, as Faust was teasing her with stuff that she's not going to tell them anyway. Dante was surprised that she told them that much. Sinclair saw this kind of sad. There are people in T-Corp's nest that have never seen colour their entire lives because of that singularity. Rudyard accepted that it's how it goes there. To those that don't know them, they're just others that haven't seen any colour in their lives. It's the danger in trying your first bite of a different yet hard-to-obtain meat. You taste it once, and you never unknow the flavour, and in the end, you start to wish you'd never tried it. Ishmael saw it as disappointing that even the sun loses its vibrancy there. And not just because of the air pollution clogging up the sky, preventing much of the sunlight from going down to the surface. Yisang longed for the colours of the sky, especially the sky that loomed over a light shower of rain, something that Rudyard saw that some would long to see, only because they've seen its beauty. Those born in District 20 without any hope of escaping it, they have no hope of ever seeing the blue sky. Death would be cheerful by comparison, due to calling life miserable there as nothing but sheltered ignorance. Yes, as in what would be terrible for some is perfectly normal for others. Sinclair saw that as true as well. And just as things were starting to get frosty in there, Rudyard asked if they've played the colours game. Apparently each type of personality has a corresponding colour. Yisang likes blue, so he must be a thinker and a philosopher. Yes, a thinker and a philosopher who prefers the calm and quiet. Okay, I understand him there. Yisang told her that she was right. Seeing her talent, Don Quixote was undecided. Hers was either red or yellow. Rudyard told her to wait her turn. She asked Faust what was hers, and she clearly gave less of a than usual. Rudyard understood that she was trying to say, Faust does not hold much belief in such ideations. She thinks white, much like her hair. She didn't want to comment further on that. As for Heathcliff's, he had to think of this. Then a great manor, the great manor ahead of them began to emerge from the distance. Dante could tell that this was Wuthering Heights. He said, black. It's a colour you get when you dump an entire set of paint into a bucket. It's why he tolerates it. Keep throwing it in and you get black. The muttering through gritted teeth suggested that this wasn't always the case. As for T-Corp's singularity, it involves the control of time. It can allow time to be slowed down, sped up, or even stopped completely. The Botany Corporation used it in the pursuit of making the Seed of Light, specifically when Ain was in charge of it. From the outside, it was around 10 years. For the inside, it was closer to 10,000 years. Yes, it's an in-game explanation to why the game can be played at real time, faster, or it can be paused. It was also used by R-Corp to get around the cloning law, where clones can't be around for more than a week in real time, allowing for months of training for much less of that in real time. W-Corp used that singularity to prevent those within the warp train from dying of dehydration or hunger, or even injury. But it drives them insane, requiring a save-state technology to make that transport method viable, at least as far as those outside of W-Corp are concerned. The time gathered in these warp trains are stored in boxes, which are likely retrieved at some point, or at least transferred to a different box for transportation purposes. Mephistopheles parks close to the gates, and Dante noticed two things that changed the moment that Wuthering Heights manor appeared over the horizon. Heathcliff demanded a mirror, asking if anyone had one, even trying to take Yi-Sang's, which doesn't work as a reflective surface. He made that clear to Heathcliff. As for the two things that are different, that have changed, one was Heathcliff, who was suddenly overcome with intense anxiety. The other is that the weather that grew tempestuous all of a sudden. Dante considered this a terrifying noise. Hong Lu asked if the weather was always that awful. Heathcliff confirmed that it was, almost a constant tempest. But the rain and, well, not the rain, the thunder and lightning are new. The weather there was awful, even without that. Ishmael remarked about how massive that manor was if it looks that big from far away. Charon couldn't see that well outside. She wasn't sure if they were at the right place, but they're at the destination. Lightning goes boom, eyes go ow. Okay, is Charon light sensitive, and does she check the sat-nav when she drives anywhere? Dante thought that the manor looked as though it came straight out of a dark, gothic tale full of mysteries. Well, the source material is not by much, then. They were half expecting to hear a haunting cry echoing from its windows. Dante then asked if they're just waiting for Virgilius to go off the bus again. Gregor asked back, when hasn't that been the case? Ishmael reasoned that it's not like they're digging into a Lobotomy Corporation branch facility or entering one of the wings. It's a manor, so she doesn't see what's stopping him from coming with them. Then, as Dante predicted, Virgilius said, "Now, off the bus." Charon and I... Roger completed his sentence by saying that they will wait outside until they're done with their mission. Virgilius was mildly annoyed by his realization that he's become too predictable. None of the damned patrol were hiding their dissatisfaction with Virgilius. Some of them were even standing with their arms crossed. This didn't escape the red gaze, and he knew that it wouldn't help anyone if he treated this as if it wasn't a problem. He saw by the looks on their faces that they all had something to say. Don Quixote, perhaps having some mild PTSD from the last time she really him off, denied this. Dante had gone through a number of things, survived various trials and tribulations, which could have easily been handled if Virgilius was there with them. Those who have read Leviathan will know what he's capable of. And that's before he basically told Carmen to go herself. and manifested EGO. Ishmael made herself their representative and asked if he was their guide, asking what kind of guide just tosses everyone at the start of their journey and goes off on their own with the bus driver, asking what they're even doing. Good question, considering that he gets more respect from Kaiman of the After Team than they do. Virgilius was silent in this. Ishmael made it clear that she's not being a hard for no good reason. She's asking this because she wants to trust him. They're technically all in the same boat, co-workers. At least, the least he could do is tell them where they're headed. He remained silent for a moment, well, there wasn't a furrowed or as furrowed a brow as usual, which meant that he found this perfectly reasonable and wasn't offended. At least not as much as Dante thought he'd be. He told them that, just like them who joined Limbus Company by signing their contracts, he also signed a contract with specific clauses and conditions that he must abide by. The clauses that we know of, at least right now, is that he can only intervene if they're all dead and Dante can't retrieve them safely. Well, revive them, to be more precise. Yes, he can get involved in other situations, only if there are situations when he knows that they're unable to deal with themselves, such as defusing a situation between them and a wing executive, which led to them having their minds wiped of any knowledge of K-Corp's singularity. This surprised Don Quixote. A color fixer was made to sign a contract as well. Well, he had good reasons to do so. If he had a better option to restore those that remained, that he saved in some form, he'd choose that instead. He confirmed to Don Quixote that of course he did. Why else would he be there babysitting them? Yes, those children on the bus. Otherwise, well, as Heath Ledger's Joker would put it, if you're good at something, never do it for free. This also applies to Virgilius, who made it clear that he saw this as almost beneath him, certainly with the way that he put this. He didn't want to detail each and every clause of his contract to them, nor should he, but he liked how Ishmael used the word trust in her speech, so they deserve at least a brief explanation. He's not supposed to retrieve the golden bars himself, nor is he allowed to provide any direct supports. At least outside of extreme circumstances, which I've previously mentioned. The contract stipulates that he must leave everything up to what I would consider to be canaries in cages. And that, in this case, is defined as Dante and the Damned Dozen. Gregor asked, why would he sign a contract like that? He told them that it's meaningless to ask why. Likely because it's a sensitive subject to him. Well, we know that, don't we? But they don't. At least not in enough detail. He saw contracts as rarely fully understood by those that aren't a part of them. But what he can tell them is that when he asks them to leave that bus for a mission, he says it with a lighter heart than he used to. He's no longer concerned that, in his desire to fulfill the conditions of every clause in his contracts, if Dante might be irreversibly hurt, he would be left with nothing, if such a thing would happen. Dante didn't know what to think of this, asking if he admitted to trusting them more than he used to. Rodier playfully told Dante not to make him repeat something like that, especially when someone went through the trouble exposing their true feelings. Besides, then Heathcliff told them to wait. He wasn't going to go in there like that. Oh, you mean looking like Virgilius on a bad day? Telling Charon to turn the bus around. She told him that Mephi doesn't do U-turns. He said, he's not going back in his lengthy rags. Dante was then reminded of their plans to dress him up in fancy clothes. And Dante didn't think that he looked that bad. Dante, he looks like he belongs in a remake of Fight Club if it was a Netflix series. He told them that if he goes back in those rags, those will... Ishmael wanted to know who these were. He answered by telling her that those that always eyed him up and down, trying to find a speck of dust, a single flaw, something to latch onto just to humiliate him. Okay, this explains much about you. Certainly regarding your anger management issues. Reissue suggested that he gouged their eyes out. Rutis saw this solution as quite clever. You would. Although if Dante objected to it, you'd likely say otherwise. Heathcliff wanted to know what they were on about. Apparently, the only one who was taking this seriously was him. Rodier had an idea, as did Honglu. They looked like they were about to have fun. Heathcliff was asking, what was wrong with them? Telling them to stop giggling like that. Rodier told him that they came prepared for that, knowing that he couldn't pull this off on his own. Honglu told him that he and Rodier did some shopping in the back streets before they entered the nest. Rodier added that they were waiting to reveal what they had, just in case they couldn't find anything more impressive in the nest, or didn't have time to get them. Thankfully, there was a disappointing amount of remotely anything in the nest, and there wasn't any unnecessary stops, but anyway. So they'd have to make do with what they picked up earlier. Heathcliff didn't believe this. When they went off on their own, he thought that all they brought back was a whole basket of cookies. Rodier told him that the cookies were decoy cookies, although some of them were eaten by her. Honglu then said that while he couldn't find the brands that he used at his home district, there should be more than enough with them for a proper fashion makeover. Virgilius was silent at this. Rodier pleaded with him to keep things happy for once, let him wear something other than his uniform. He doesn't want to meet Kathy in his work clothes. He was silent. Heathcliff didn't think that Virgilius would ever let him do something like that. Then he approved of this, which, it surprised Heathcliff. Virgilius didn't want to encourage another rogue incident with the back door, likely referring to Don Quixote and Heathcliff's desire for clothes that led them to the outskirts gift factory, where the gnomes made them out of captured humans, dead or alive. Heathcliff understood that, on this occasion at least, he was taking the... Then Honglu told him to close his eyes as he did his hair, telling him to leave it to them, to pretend that they're a peach blossom spring. He protested initially. Then Honglu remarks on how not half bad he is at that. Then Honglu, with Rodier as his assistant, gave him his makeover. Sometime later, Heathcliff was dressed as if he was in a costume drama set in Regency Britain. Actually presentable for once. Dante was unsure of what to say. Heathcliff was worried that they might have overdid it with the hair. Roger was angry at him for touching it, telling him not to, reminding him how hard Honglu works on that. Quite a bit, considering that he looks like a shaved Wookiee at the start. Ishmael asked where his bat went. Roger reminded her that it's a reunion. They can't have him wielding that when that happened. Don Quixote remarks that he appears more merciful than usual, feeling that he might accept her request if she asked him to purchase a pint of ice cream. Dream on! Sinclair didn't feel that he looked like he was on the verge of punching him when he made the smallest noise. Heathcliff requested that he didn't bring anything remotely like that in front of Catherine, showing more restraint than he usually does. Virgilius remarked on how clothes really do make the man, telling him to let him know how the reunion goes. He'll be looking forward to hearing that tale. Heathcliff would do so. Dante then asked Heathcliff, and they've been wanting to ask this for a while, but didn't want to ask him before, why did he leave Wuthering Heights, where the love of his life lives? This made Heathcliff stop. According to him, it wasn't the thrashings, the starvings, the abuse, being treated like a servant, like he was something beneath them, like he's nothing but an afterthought, like he's some impure trash to be discarded. It was what he heard Catherine say. That's when he realized that he could no longer stay, that he had no reason to remain there. He didn't elaborate further than that, likely knowing that it would be covered eventually. Well, it wasn't because he didn't, it was because he couldn't bring himself to. Dante didn't dare ask farther about that, so they simply nodded. Then Charon walked up to Heathcliff, Roger noticing that she had something to say, which she did. It was something big. Roger was excited by this, asking her what she thought. Charon said that it looks oily and greasy. She didn't like greasy. This comment about his hair left Heathcliff dumbfounded. Roger didn't think that it would go like that. Charon's words hit him hard. It took quite a bit of convincing to get Heathcliff off the bus. Physical and emotional abuse in childhood by most of those in Wuthering Heights. Well, except perhaps Nellie and Kathy. Of course. No wonder he became what he was now. It's a miracle that he didn't become a psychotic serial killer, at worst. It also made sense that the only thing keeping him there was Kathy, and when he heard that she wasn't interested in him, he had no reason to stay. But who said that? If it was Kathy, I could understand that, but if it was someone else, that might just be what they want him to believe, as they likely see no problems with using underhanded tactics towards those that were beneath them. I mean, there are some fixers that are that deceitful for less than that. Heathcliff walked up to the front gate, thinking that his clothes were uncomfortable, asking if it's normal for the clothes that he was wearing to squeeze harder with every step he took. Honglu saw it as for what it meant. It was meant to maintain an air of dignity. Once he gets used to that feeling, he'll feel like he's missing something whenever he dressed casually. Yi-sang saw that the front gate of his former abode was in front of them. Dante saw it as downright intimidating, seeing it as one big front door. According to Masson, in some regions of the city, the size of the front gate indicates social standing. And based on what he's seeing, Wuthering Heights was owned by one who was very affluent. Ishmael had an accusing look on her, as Heathcliff picked on Hong Lu for being a rich kid when he himself was raised at a huge mansion. Hong Lu didn't take it personally. Rodia felt a bit betrayed. Don Quixote saw Heathcliff as quite different that day. Heathcliff told them to keep their stupid comments to themselves. He was clearly not in the mood for the teasing and the surprise. Besides, it didn't matter to him. What he spoke of that place was dripping with venomous spite. He didn't consider himself remotely close to being rich, not even once in that manner. He wasn't even allowed to be content, not even for a moment. That manor didn't accept him, not even for a moment. Lightning struck nearby, startling both Gregor and Heathcliff. Brutus saw it as striking near a forest, and Dante considered it loud. Sinclair heard that it was rare for lightning to hit people. Yi-sang saw that a momentary musing revealed that a strike of 11 brings about a sensation that is not unlike the joy of fireworks. Well, if they actually survive it. It fills the dark and cold void of the night sky with its incandescent brilliance, even for a brief moment, before fading away into oblivion. Heathcliff understood. Then he added that in exchange, it loses everything that it has, burning and leaving nothing but ash behind, asking what joy there was to be found. Then Dante saw some forest critters fleeing, out of fear of the last thunderstrike. Seeing a squirrel running excited Don Quixote. Likely the Eurasian red squirrel, although the red part isn't visible while they're in that part of the city. Hong Lu was fascinated by nature being so close to home, seeing that Heathcliff lived in an eco-friendly place. If he lived in a place like that, he wouldn't have had a private zoo built. Well, it's as eco-friendly as it can get for a district that's in a different circle of Greenpeace hell, due to the factories polluting the sky to hide the stars at night. Woods saw this as more evidence of affluence, due to the garden or forest close to home, even if the rest was ignored. Roger then remembered that Sinclair's home was in the middle of a forest. Yes, in the middle of a forest. Heathcliff confirmed the presence of squirrels. Other animals roamed about as well. Sometimes when he was so miserable that he could hardly bear to even be in that manner, he'd go to the forest and not return for a while, likely taking what he needed to be able to survive in there. Possibly hunting the wildlife, so that he didn't starve to death. Then Don Quixote saw Sir Little Squirrel as a jolly companion for him. Then a lightning bolt struck the squirrel. Dante saw what was that squirrel as what might have been a friend to Heathcliff, or at least a relative of that one. It was immediately scorched down to a pile of ash the moment that it crossed over into the manor's front gate. Gregor asked if that weird lightning strike just curved mid-air. Faust saw The chance of that being extraordinarily low. Likely the same chance of being killed by slipping on a grape on a non-slippery floor. Gregor repeated what he said, suspecting that he might be overreacting, that it appeared to curve itself to strike exactly where the squirrel was standing. Ishmael had no idea that he grew up in such a dangerous place. She was impressed that he survived. Ishmael, somehow I think lightning strikes were the least of his problems. Heathcliff didn't see anything like that. Clearly, this was more recent. Something that happened after he left. Dante then asked if he was ready to knock on the front gates. Heathcliff felt uneasy about doing this, staring blankly at it. He's not knocked on the front gates for many years. He once had to wait there for hours because they all refused to let him in. Everyone except Catherine. She snuck out to open it for him, walking through the heavy rain. Yes, the heavy rain. Yes, not something that anyone would do lightly. But in her case, she appeared to consider it worth it. Ishmael was optimistic that it won't be different this time. Possibly encouraged by this, he started to believe that if he knocks, Catherine will let him in. Dante chose not to say anything about this. Heathcliff then took a deep breath and knocked on the front gate. He waited for a time. Then Ishmael said that this wasn't what she meant when she said it wouldn't be different this time, asking if they can try climbing over the fence. They can clear that height as long as they're okay with breaking their ankles, remembering that Dante can heal them. Heathcliff said no. In fact, this angered him, due to this perceived slight. He reminded her that he was invited there. An invitation would be meaningless if he was to leap over that fence. He shouted to Catherine that he's back. Otis told them that they ignored him once. Continuing to shout wouldn't. He ignored her, and he continued to shout, despite none stirring beyond the gates. None of the others believed that any would come out to greet them. Or even him. But as Heathcliff was about to do so again, the gate opened. Clearly someone heard him and wanted him to enter. Honglu believing that the makeover was worth it. Dante saw that the heavy rain and the tempest was only growing harsher as they got closer to the manor. I can imagine how much the repair bills and other maintenance costs would be for such a place, if it was always raining there. Well, at least the plant life won't need watering. Don Quixote saw that they were past the front gate, yet there was no one there. Dante saw that there was no more excitement that was there after they left the bus. They felt apprehension as they walked gingerly towards the manor. As for Heathcliff, he was nervously working on his lines, asking Kathy if she's been well, then thinking that it's been a while, thinking that line won't work either. He was clearly focused on something else. As for the others, another lightning strike happened. Rodia asked if they noticed that. Nassau observed that it struck a subspecies of sparrow. Otis saw that lightning continues to strike aggressively, even that far past the front gate. Sinclair was worried that they'd be burnt to a crisp if they had been struck closer to them. Dante observed that lightning continued to blast the earth as if it wouldn't stop until all within the manor grounds were reduced to ashes. Roger was concerned about either walking faster or slower to avoid being struck. Usually it's the tallest objects that is struck. Otis saw no difference how fast they walked. It was as if the lightning had a mind of its own, striking with intent. This seemed to recall unpleasant memories in her. Now that is interesting. It appears that the past of Otis involves unnatural weather. Honglu believed that it was the house's defense mechanism. Yisang asked if he's implying that it might be part of the manor's security measures. Honglu believed that it only targeted things that entered without permission, although he's seen security measures that are more precise and more conclusive than that. He knows of larger manors that install more effective security systems. Sinclair confirmed this by saying that his family talked about installing a defense system at their home. It kept coming up during dinner. Well, that might have at least slowed down the Nagel und Hammer when they came for his family. It made sense to Ishmael, even though she'll struggle to comprehend the thought process behind those systems. Yisang theorized that the security measures that prevented the before team from approaching the manor might be... Honglu seemed unconcerned about this, as they have the invitation, so they should be fine. Dante wasn't so sure. They asked if that's all that was, a normal security measure for rich families. Honglu was impressed by this, as weather control technology is it's expensive as hell, and even then it's inefficient. It's so expensive that he's not seeing it himself. Clearly your family was comparatively more frugal, Honglu. Dante was silent during this, as they didn't want to concern the others of what they weren't sure about, but the closer they got to the manor, the more confident they were of something being off. The abnormal weather wasn't a part of the security system. This had to do with the Golden Bar, but this one felt different to the others, more chaotic. Then Sinclair noticed something about the flowers. They had colour! Dante saw that too. The garden was lightly littered with flowers, the only things with colour in that dreary environment. Sinclair asked what those flowers were called. Roger, noting that colours can be returned even to flowers if enough cash is spent on that. Faust agreed. Yisang suspected that the proprietor of that manor has a particular love of those flowers, if they were to return colours to them. Either that or it's because they were ridiculously loaded. Heathcliff looks at the patches of flowers during this and told him that he was wrong. That there was no particular love for those flowers. There was no room, no warmth in that heart to spare for mere flowers. It was like a tall, opaque wall was built between him and everyone else. So Dante didn't ask further about that. He didn't even name those flowers, or more specifically say the name of them. Then someone told them to come that way, running from the front door, holding a lantern. A woman with a frilly apron approached them. Noting that Wuthering Heights was rarely sunny, but it was a storm even by that place's standards. Heathcliff was hesitant to speak to her, managing to say, "Long time no see, Nelly." Nelly was surprised to see Heathcliff, mostly by his appearance. She made it clear that she was worried since he left, asking if he was eating well, if he was bullied by a rough crowd. Well, if you define that as being killed painfully by a big brother of the middle for stealing his hair salon coupons. This comment surprised Dante. Nellie told him that they've wanted to hear from him for so long. Heathcliff had nothing to say about this. Nellie told him to come in. Then she noticed Dante and the others. She wanted to know what they were supposed to be. She asked if they were Heathcliff's friends. Okay, that's a stretch, but let's go with that. Heathcliff wanted them to confirm this. Ishmael and Sinclair didn't give a clear answer. Massault told her that it hinges on the range of affinity one would define as a delineation that separates friends from acquaintances. Yep, typical autistic response from Massault. And I would certainly know something about that. Rodia made an effort to convince her that they were precious friends, yes. Forged in fires, multiple fires. Actually, let's see. Fighting wing remnants in District 4, taking on syndicates and running from Baba Yaga in District 10, taking on the N-Corp Psycho Division along with a distorted fast food joint owner, terrorists, and one that betrayed Yi Sang and the rest of the League of Nine in District 11, dealing with the scourges and the perils of the Great Lake and the outskirts, and recently, a distorted returnee of the library in the back streets of District 20, so she's not wrong about that part. Otis then said that Heathcliff's precious friends are about to freeze to their deaths in the rain. Nellie noted that she must be all over the place with her honourable guest to leave them all standing in the rain, telling them to come in as it's warmer in there than outside. Dante saw that while the interior was dark, Don Quixote noted that, she noted that it had colour. The hue was that had faded from what it should be, but it was still colour. Heathcliff knew that there'd be colour in there, all bought by money. It's to do with the lanterns hanging in the Mara that does this. Yi Sang understood that the lanterns restore they return saturation to their surroundings, which are quite expensive luxuries. Heathcliff added that it doesn't bring all the colours back, it's still gloomy in there. He then asked where Kathy was. Nellie wanted to know of his life since he left them, asking where he's been staying, has he been eating well, has he lost weight. Well, he was part of a vigilante syndicate, and after that, he's with his current employment as a soldier of fortune dealing with abnormalities and distortions, along with killing any that threatens them enough. And he stays in the bus connected to a corridor. He's been eating well enough, not sure about his weight. This surprised Heathcliff, he wasn't expecting this. Nellie was glad that he wasn't delayed too much. They've all been waiting for his arrival. Heathcliff wanted to know who this we was. Nellie then had a better look at time. Or rather, a better look at him, his refined clothes, the hair. That he's grown into a right proper gentleman. Quite popular with his posse of friends. Heathcliff was confused by this. Nellie continued by saying that from a distance he wouldn't have been recognised. Nellie talked so fast that Heathcliff couldn't get a word in. Then Otis wanted to ask something, specifically what her precise relation was to Heathcliff. as his precious friend, colleague, and comrade in arms, she can't help but be curious as to how they knew each other. It was the most transparently suspicious question that Dante has ever heard. Nellie struggled to find a way of putting this, saying that she was his nanny. This surprised Ishmael, asking if he wiped Heathcliff's knotty nose, changed his clothes, and... Wait, is she thinking of the right kind of nanny? Honglu then added that she spoon-fed the food when he was fussy about it. This made Heathcliff nervous, as he told Mary Poppins to quit teasing him like that. She wasn't exactly his nanny, and she knew that, but they did know each other. Since they were young. He didn't treat her like a servant or followed her around as she was his nanny. She then made it clear that she was now the chief butler of the house. The others moved like soldiers when she gave the word. Heathcliff knew why. She was the best at her job. Then she was told by him that he was getting quite impatient, so he had to ask. Dante knew that he wanted to ask where Kathy was, but then he asked when the banquet was starting. Nellie had an expression that showed that it wasn't that kind of occasion. Then someone from another room asked when that witless brigand was coming. Was he even on his way? I see they've met him as well. He then told her that she can't just leave after gathering them all down there. If he had to sit any second longer next to those mugs, he's going to lose it. Yeah, he sounded furious. Heathcliff recognised that voice, and Nellie shouted that he shouldn't rush, he's only just arrived, then telling Heathcliff that they should join the others. They'd been waiting for his arrival. He didn't like this, yet he followed her regardless. Rodia understood that manor as not the place to throw a party. Rodia, it's not even a manor for hosting a murder mystery night, even though it looks the part. Sinclair noted the similar feeling that he had between that manor and the cruise ship, that they encountered the mermaids of the Whale of 1,000 Strands. Feeling a rising sense of dread, he couldn't ignore it, regardless of how hard he tried to. Even Massault noted that there has never been liveliness there, and before he could say anything more, Don Quixote was disappointed by the lack of party, seeing it as quite depressing. Well, what the were you expecting? The reception that you lot have received so far was so cold, it'd make the worst day in the back streets of District 25, Rodia's home district, feel almost tropical. The reception is unlikely to be any warmer from this point onwards. Until next time. Hail the rabbit!